All right, welcome to the first episode of the Generation Lyme podcast. My name is Jesse Ruben. I'm on the board of Generation Lyme, and I am joined by fellow board members Brooke Stoddard, Haley DiBiase, and Jennifer Hoffmann. And we are here convening an emergency podcast to discuss the Bloomberg Businessweek article entitled Dubious Alternative Lyme Treatments Are Killing Patients by Lindsay Gelman. There's been a lot of talk about this article. We have lots of opinions on it. Hi, guys. How's it going?
Hi, Jesse.
Hey,
Everyone good?
Jesse.
Everyone okay?
Hey.
I just learned Haley's last name today, which is terrible. So first of all, before we get into like everything that's wrong with this article, and there are numerous things, and we could probably talk for a very long time. I do think in the for fairness, we should mention what did this article actually get right? What actually worked about it? What was relieving about it? What did when you were reading it, it didn't make you mad?
All right, I could start with something, and it's really, really basic. And spoiler alert, it will come back around when I say what I didn't like about it. This article acknowledges that Lyme disease is a problem, kind of like explicitly and implicitly, which is refreshing.
Just even that the basis of the article was not
Yeah,
every one
yeah,
of these people thinks is insane.
that they're wackadoo, that this is a made up disease. This is actually talking about people who have a real health problem or set of health problems and are looking for solutions. And we've seen way too many articles in the past where people talk about anything serious relating to Lyme disease as being pretty much a hoax. So that one aspect of this to me was a little nudge of like, oh, that's good.
Way to go, Lindsay Gelman, for getting that very minor point correct.
Mm-hmm.
Brooke and Haley, was there anything about the article that you thought that rang true for you that you appreciated?
Yeah, I mean, look, she spent a year, in her words, researching this article, and there are a few things I thought she did well. She acknowledged and made it very clear that Lyme disease symptoms can be persistent, and that treatment for persistent symptoms are unclear. There's just no silver bullet right now, and that those treatment plans can be super expensive. I mean, she got those factually correct.
She got some things factually correct. Didn't she mention in the article that antibiotics are the way that it gets treated, or was that from other research that I was doing before? Is that not in the article?
It's mentioned briefly that the 2 to 4 week
Yeah,
thing.
just
Yeah, for acute Lyme.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with both Brooke and Jennifer. She actually says that these patients had Lyme disease or have Lyme disease, which is a rarity that you see in these articles. So that was refreshing. Um, and like Jennifer said, my positive will also come around later. But the fact that she mentions that there are people kind of preying on desperate people, it is true. There are people out there. I'm not sure if she picked the right people to mention in her article for that, but I myself have paid a ridiculous amount of money for, false promises of treatments that were total whatever you want to call them. And so, yeah, I mean, I like that she called people out for that. I just don't like who she called out.
Yeah. I think that was one thing that I also appreciated about it is there definitely are doctors taking advantage of these patients. I mean, I've definitely spent time at not clinics, but like especially international like Lyme events and spending time with doctors and hearing them like brag to each other about how much they're charging their patients and like the new cars that they just bought is like when they didn't know that I was a patient myself is like absolutely nauseating and we all know that that happens, but there is another side of that conversation which I'm sure we will get into. um, that feels right, like 2.5 minutes about what went right about this article. Now we're going to talk about now we're going to actually get into like why we're doing this, which is we, the four of us, are very involved in the Lyme community. We interact with Lyme patients every day. We all have personal experiences with this disease, with doctors, with treatments, which with paying for them, with people reaching out to us all the time. Um, And all four of us kind of separately all had very strong opinions about this article, some that overlapped and some didn't. And so I'd really like to spend some time to talk about like where this writer missed an opportunity, what went wrong, how she screwed this up, what she could do better, uh, just all the ways that this article could have been different and in a good way and isn't. Jennifer, what's like the first thing that stands out to you about like what she could have done differently?
Well, I think this person could have been part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And to go more in depth, the positive that I stated, that she recognizes Lyme disease as a problem that doesn't have clear solutions. It doesn't, it doesn't have treatments that are, universally applied, that people know work, any of that, and that people are really suffering. It's great that she acknowledges that, but instead, what she does is attack the patients and their decisions, as opposed to why the patients are in that position to be faced with additional risks in treatment and stuff like that. Not attacking the problem, just piling more onto the victim. And to me, I think that is lazy and extremely unhelpful. There was a great opportunity, use that word, to be part of something new, because all she kind of said, the majority of what she said has already been said by multiple people in multiple pieces. It's not the only stuff out there. There's plenty that back up what we have to say, but this isn't new. It wasn't groundbreaking, but from all the research that she did, she had the perfect opportunity to be like, wait, this problem's bigger than I thought. This problem's more pervasive. It goes deep into this area and that area. Let me research more. I have to do more than I thought I had to do. And then let me kind of expose the whole thing instead of just staying at the surface and going, isn't that crazy?
Right.
That's
so it sort of just stops right there of like, here's this problem, but no, like, why are these people getting to this point where they're needing to make these choices? How are we failing? Because they bring up like the FDA and treatments and all this stuff. Like, the government, the medical community is failing these people, but
and it's
that's not
completely
acknowledged at all.
Right. It's completely illogical to me, because if you're going to say, oh, this is a problem and there are people with health issues, like really massive things that are doing that, and then wouldn't that beg the question, why are they in that position, or what should they be doing, or like, and where does my job fall into this? Like, I would think that would be the logical next step. But I'm a Lyme patient, so I must be weird in the way that I think, like completely off the beaten track. But I would argue that that's actually the sort of logical leap that this takes, or just really misstep, missing an opportunity, failing to connect the dots on where the patients are failed and why.
Because it's the implication to me feels like, well, I guess they should have just done nothing and then continued to live their lives and suffer in the way that they were suffering.
Well, they're fine. They wouldn't have. And yet she describes all the problems they had before they got treatments that didn't go well. So no one would read that and expect that those people would have had good lives or even necessarily long lives.
Yeah.
So
100%.
The problems just seem so obvious to me. And that's why it's just so infuriating that this kind of thing gets published without, it's like, you haven't even done your due diligence yet. Come on.
I wonder if she published it like expecting there to be a backlash, kind of. I don't know. That gets into like conspiracy theories.
I mean, she might have been going by any press is good press, and then my goodness, you got a lot of that.
Okay, wait, Haley, you brought up a point to me about like the first third of the article that as soon as you pointed it out, like completely blew my mind. About the beginning of the article is about this woman who gets. Can you just like talk about the woman who gets MRSA for a second?
Yeah. So the article talks about how the initial patient who.
Her name is DJ Cartwright.
Thank you. DJ Cartwright had a port implanted into her chest, like you get ports, they're under the skin. And the author went on to talk about how she was getting all these treatments, and then all of a sudden she had MRSA because of the port. But the difference there is that the MRSA came from the port and the area of the port that got infected. It didn't come from the ozone. It didn't come from the medication.
And it certainly didn't come from the Lyme doctor that had her have the port put in.
Right. So I personally had a port, probably a very similar one, for 2 years. And before you get it put in, it is a scary thing because it connects to your jugular vein, basically.
Yeah, that sounds intense.
Yeah, it's awful. It sits in your chest, and then the tube goes up in your neck and connects directly to a vein, which shoots directly to your heart. So you are warned before getting one that it is a very dangerous thing. There can be blood clots related to it. There can be infection because it is a surgery. Any surgery can cause infection. So for a while I didn't get it because of that, but I got to the point where I was desperate. There's that word again. So I did it. And for the 2 years that I had it, the implantation process, which was done at a Western medical hospital, and the removal surgery that was also done at a Western hospital, were the only two, other than like 2 possible blood clot trips to the emergency room. Those were the only negative experiences that I had with my port. All that was done between me and my LMD were all positive, all really comforting. And the scariest parts were when I did have to go into a modern medicine place and either have it put in, taken out, or...
What happened when you had your port put in?
So when I had my port implanted, you're supposed to be knocked out, and the anesthesia didn't work. So I remember the whole thing. I felt, yeah, you want some serious like PTSD flashbacks? Get a port implanted without anesthesia.
Crazy.
If anyone out there has done this and they're not traumatized for the rest of their life, I commend you endlessly. But yeah, I mean, I was literally on the table saying, I know exactly what's going on. I need more. And they were like, oh no, you're fine.
How many times do Lyme patients get told, oh no, you're fine, by Western medicine?
All the time.
Yeah.
More than the amount of dollars I've spent on this treatment.
Also, I just want to commend you for battling all the plants that are taking over your apartment to be on this call today. You're very brave.
I have very clean air here.
All right, Brooke, what is your biggest takeaway from this article? Because I know you're a finance guy. This is a big publication in your world. This is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have 2 things to say, so I'll just pick one of them. But I thought that the author wrote the article with this premise or this conclusion that LLMDs are sort of wacky and overdiagnosed Lyme disease. And she cites in the article that there are approximately 500 LLMDs out there, and then goes on to talk about a very small number of them who have faced some very complicated situations with patients. And I would say to anyone who read the article or doesn't know the Lyme disease world very well, the reason LLMDs are important is that LLMDs have just treated hundreds, if not thousands, of Lyme disease cases over the past years or decades, and just have a much better understanding of Lyme disease than your typical family doctor or specialist in another area. And the journalist's premise actually really hurt my feelings because my experience with LLMDs has been tremendously positive. I've had Lyme disease and Babesiosis for 10 years. I went to about 12 very good doctors in the New York area, none of which told me that I had Lyme disease. And then I found an LLMD, and he turned out to be the most scientifically driven, cautious, but also caring physician who I've now seen for the past 7 years. I've gotten 95% better under his care. And any decision that he and I have ever made together in terms of treatment or diagnosis has been very research driven. It's been based on, hours of discussions where he and I have talked about my symptom set. And we've run dozens of the best available blood tests for Lyme disease and other co-infections. So my view on LLMDs is they are doing very necessary work that most traditional doctors can't do or don't have time to do, or for some reason just aren't doing.
Or don't know enough about the problem to know that that's even an option.
Right. And so, LLMDs are really saving Lyme disease patients. And I'm incredibly grateful for the one that I go to. His name is Kenneth Liegner. And without him, I don't think I would have gotten better over the past 7 years.
Yeah, I want to build off of that too, because the doctor who saved my life twice is mentioned in this article. And, just like in modern medicine, things go wrong with treatment in Lyme disease too. Like how many stories have you heard of surgeries gone wrong or people having adverse effects from pills or addiction?
I mean, there's they mentioned in the article where this woman thought was really sick or was in a bunch of pain, and it was because she had a screwed up breast implant surgery.
Right, exactly. There's medical malpractice all over the board, and this article really, how I read it, really kind of focused on like, oh no, we're good over here. It's really this Lyme world that's messing up. And I know a bunch of the names in the article of the doctors. I have only seen one of them, but I was with him for about 10 years. And he brought me from a vegetable, quite literally, to what you're seeing today. And
which is decidedly not a vegetable.
Decidedly not a vegetable. I eat a lot of vegetables now, but I'm not. I even grow them, but
oh my God.
But no, I mean, I'm eternally grateful for him, and if it wasn't for him, I would not be alive today. And I can say that, and my family would say that, and he would say that too, with 100% confidence. And like she has a huge highlighted quote that says, "Desperation doesn't make for a rational choice." No shit. Like, when have you
quality
met,
journalism right
yeah,
there?
like when have you met a rational, desperate human?
Yeah.
But when you have, I mean, talk to anyone with chronic Lyme disease. They have seen multiple specialists in multiple areas. And like, by all means, if you don't know what's going on with you, rule stuff out, get tested for it all if you want. But if everything comes up negative or normal and you still feel like you're withering away and you have crippling pain or anxiety or, all the crazy stuff that comes with Lyme disease, then maybe having 20 of these top specialists saying, we don't know what it is, but it's not Lyme, and giving you no option, and then having the one crazy Lyme specialist saying, I have a treatment for you, I can help you, it's going to be a long ass road, but I'm here with you.
I'm going with that guy.
Right.
Every time.
Right. I don't care if he's telling me to chew on a celery stick all day. Like,
sure. 100%. Love celery.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
Whatever he tells me to do, if I'm as desperate as I was, and as desperate as many
as these people in the article are,
right, Lyme patients are, they're going to pick that option. And most of the time, it works out eventually.
Yeah.
But of course, there's going to be some things that don't. And that's horrible. But that is also part of medicine in general.
I do just want to go into it very briefly, because one of the things that really bugged me about this article was there was no mention of the fact that, like, she did mention that there are approximately 300,000 cases a year, which I appreciated that she did mention that, which means that every 10 years we have 3 million Americans with this illness. I think the numbers are much, much higher. The fact that financially we're not being supported by the government in the way that other diseases with similar or even much smaller numbers of patients are getting. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. Brooke, I know that you have some of them written down, and I would really like for you to read them because they make me mad every time I hear them.
I wrote these down just for you, Jesse. Okay.
Thank you.
So here's the thing. If you are a Lyme disease patient, so you get Lyme disease and your case is confirmed and the CDC and the NIH pick up on that, then every year the NIH is spending about $768 on you as a patient. The CDC is spending about $302 on you as a patient. It's not a lot of money. By comparison, if you are an HIV and AIDS patient, the NIH is spending $77,355 on you as a person, and the CDC is spending an additional $20,293 on you as a patient.
So 90 times more, basically, ish, which is just crazy. The other thing I want to mention about this article, just from a personal note, ozone treatment really gets dragged through the mud in this article. I think it's brought up like 3 or 4 times, and usually with the underlying meaning being like, isn't it crazy that this person was given ozone treatment? Ozone treatment 100% saved my life, just on a personal level. Like, I recommend it to everyone all the time. Compared to lots of other treatment options I was given, it was like one of the least crazy. I'm grateful for it all the time. I did look it up before we started, and the FDA says that ozone is a toxic gas with no known useful medical application, but they also just approved a company to go into phase 3 trials for the type of treatment and that I and a lot of other Lyme patients are given. So those are 2 contradictory things, which makes me think that it has a lot to do with politics and money. You can't, what's the word? You can't patent ozone treatment. It's not a drug that you can patent. You can't make money off of it. In all of my research, I keep reading that's one of the main reasons why the FDA hasn't approved it. Obviously, they realize that it's beneficial in some way because they just let this company go to phase 3 trials. So obviously, they're like, it's not a crazy treatment that people shouldn't be getting. It's legal in other countries. It made me mad every time it came up in the article, and I know it's helped me and so many other people. And I just had to mention that because it just drives me crazy. What were some other things about this that made you mad or annoyed?
I mean, I have one thing.
Yeah.
The article ends in a sort of unusual way. I think the author kind of laments that celebrities and hedge fund managers are funding research or like raising awareness of Lyme disease. And I actually take exactly the opposite view on this. So when I think about the evolution of Lyme disease understanding, Lyme has been around for 40 years. At least it was discovered in the early 80s. And as tough as it is for the 4 of us as Lyme disease patients now, it's been even worse for a lot of people who came before us. But I think that things are changing. And for anyone listening to this, I think there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful. And here's what I think about. There are literally thousands of people telling their personal stories of Lyme disease across all social media platforms right now, including the 4 of us. You have celebrities like Avril Lavigne and Justin Bieber and Amy Schumer basically telling the world that they've been struggling with Lyme disease as well. And you have more money being funneled into Lyme disease nonprofits and Lyme disease research than ever before. And my favorite example of this is that a government organization, the HHS, which is the Health and Human Services Department, and a private foundation called the Cohen Foundation, basically teamed up to create a $25 million innovation fund to help people sort of solve the Lyme disease problem over time. And this is literally the largest public-private partnership ever in the history of the US. And so I think finally a lot of attention is being paid to Lyme disease. I would also mention that the Kay-Hagan Act was passed last year, which was sponsored by congressmen in Minnesota, New Jersey, and Maine. And that actually devotes $150 million to vector-borne illnesses, of which one is Lyme disease, over the next several years. So I personally think that, like, as hard as our lives can be sometimes as Lyme disease patients, as we're just begging people to understand what we're going through, that there are so many reasons to be hopeful right now, and things are finally starting to change.
Haley, Jennifer, are there other things about this article you want to mention?
You know,
Because I have a bunch written down that I haven't even gotten to
Yeah.
yet.
I mean, I feel like there's always going to be something.
I definitely have something that I want to say about it, but go ahead, go ahead, Haley.
Oh boy. I mean, I guess I'll touch on the misdiagnosis thing.
The minor misdiagnosis.
I can't not like squirm during this conversation because I would anyway. And this is just,
Guys, we all reread this article before this. I think we all did. And oh man, it just gets worse every time.
Sure does.
Whew. But yeah, so she harps on this misdiagnosis thing. They were misdiagnosed with Lyme. They really had X amount of things, one being the silicone explosion. Which is
not funny.
No, that's a horrible way to say that. I'm so sorry.
Explosion? All right, let's keep it moving. This is a professional organization.
The silicone leaking.
Yeah.
Anyway, she really harps on the misdiagnosis and that these LMDs are like preying on sick people to diagnose them with Lyme and take all their money. And like I said in the beginning, there certainly are people like that. There's a lot of people who like money more than, humanity these days.
Sure.
But if you look at Western medicine, which fails Lyme patients on a minute by minute basis, I'm not even going to say daily basis anymore. If you just back up a little bit and widen the picture, not even that much, just a little bit, there are misdiagnoses all the time. I'll use myself as an example. I went to the Cleveland Clinic before I had a diagnosis.
The great and powerful Cleveland Clinic.
The great and powerful Cleveland Clinic. I also, I saw a lot of top specialists, both at the Cleveland Clinic and elsewhere. And if you talk to anyone with chronic Lyme, they will tell you a very similar story. But when I got there, I was diagnosed with a whole myriad of things. And then they did further testing and I was negative for everything. So I'm the first to tell you, if you're in the search of what is happening to you, to go get tested, to rule stuff out. But if you look at these cases of people passing away, right? And autopsies being done. There's been studies done on Alzheimer's patients having autopsies and Borrelias in their tissues. I don't remember the numbers, but I know they were higher than they should have been for undiagnosed Lyme. And I've heard multiple stories of like a young person dying of a heart attack out of the blue. Yeah. And then they have an autopsy done because it's so unexpected and random. And Borrelia or other Lyme bacteria are found in the tissues. So this misdiagnosis thing goes both ways. And I think it's really unfair to talk about it in the way that she talked about it without addressing the other side.
And numbers wise, it's probably much bigger the other way, where doctors are missing Lyme diagnoses versus misdiagnosing people who don't have Lyme with Lyme disease.
Not to even mention the amount of mistreatment after a Lyme diagnosis has been proven.
Yeah. 100%.
That's a whole nother podcast.
100%.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Jennifer, what's your final thought about this article?
My final thought about this article, when I probably have many more that I could give, is just that we're not on the wrong side of science, and we always find ourselves on the defense. Despite that, we're doing this thing right now to provide a rebuttal for something that came out, when really this is just going to be, we don't have to defend this stuff in its reality. We just don't. So everybody, they just kind of have to catch up to us despite this effort that we're making. It kind of perpetuates this notion that we're in the wrong, or like that we're marginalized for a good reason, because we always find ourselves on the defense, and like the efforts people usually see are defensive measures being taken, but that's just not the reality of what's going on scientifically. To touch on Haley's point about misdiagnoses and other treatments and stuff like that, when you rule things out, a lot of people, a lot of us, and people without Lyme disease, but get diagnosed with a whole bunch of stuff that most traditional doctors will acknowledge as being real, and like having a normal treatment plan, an agreed upon plan. So we get diagnosed with all those things, and we do the treatments for those things. And I think that is really worth talking about, because those are all misdiagnoses, and those are all people who could arguably be, in retrospect at least, considered taking money without good cause, because those treatments will not make you better if your problem is an underlying infection and that isn't being treated. And so a lot of us end up in this desperate state. And I just want to touch back on this, because we have actually tried other things that have failed. And then on top of that, when we do Lyme treatments, we do get better. So again, I think that begs a question that is not answered in this article, and has so far been unanswered in the majority of articles we've had to respond to, if not all of them.
Yeah.
So they have to catch up to us. I had a sort of a primary care physician who I saw for years when I was at some of my sickest points, undiagnosed, but diagnosed with like, you know, this organ doesn't work and that organ doesn't work, but that's separate. And you have allergies, but that's unrelated. And you have like everything. And I was like, but I'm the machine, you know, I'm just one thing. So how could this all be unrelated when the diagnoses stack on each other, and I'm taking a ridiculous amount of medication for all of them, and changing my diet, my lifestyle, and all of that, not getting better. This doctor did not tell me that I was faking it or making it up, or that it was in my head, although he did ask me if I had someone to talk to about it all, because he just finally said, well, I'm sorry, you're just ahead of medicine. Like, we know there are people like you out there, and you know, that have the problems you have, but we don't know what it is, and you're just ahead. We can't do anything about it.
You're just a trendsetter. You're just a cool.
Yeah, I know. Right. I was like, I want to think I'm special, but I know I'm not. Like, this is not.
Yeah.
That's not why. Like, this is, I am not ahead. There's no chance I am ahead here. And shortly thereafter, I got properly tested for tick-borne infections and stuff like that. And I had enough to go back to him with, because I had like one more appointment. And I was like, what do you make of this? And he just kind of sighed. And I said, so you're just not, this is just not your thing, but you know about all of this? And he was like, yeah, I'm sorry. And that was probably one of the most honest conversations that any of us ends up having with like a traditional primary care doctor when it comes to this stuff. And that shouldn't happen. That's ridiculous.
Well,
whether the conversation or the treatment, it just shouldn't happen.
We should do a separate podcast where we just talk about our experiences with normal doctors.
Absolutely. But I think it's relevant when we talk about this article and stuff like this article, because there is an entire backstory that gets left out. And it's hardly even backstory. It's like stuff that's happening simultaneously. Yeah. It just gets left out of the picture here. And so it's extremely relevant to what the author is trying to convey.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what Jennifer said about the fact that we try so hard to heal and to get a diagnosis, that's so important to touch on, because we do. And by the time that we get to the Lyme diagnosis, there's nothing left of us. Like, we have no more energy. We are completely like she said, desperation is like the ultimate, end, right? Like, by the time we agree. And I think nowadays, like Brooke said, it's getting better for Lyme. So like I was diagnosed 10 years ago. And even from then to now, there's been a big difference in doctors' knowledge for the people who do treat Lyme. But I know like back then when I was looking for a treatment, by the time I finally said okay to my Lyme doctor, I was so empty of all hope and energy and everything, because I had spent the previous 15 years trying to heal myself and figure out what was going on, like Jennifer was saying. And so many of us do that.
Yeah.
You know?
I wish she asked, why are they so desperate? Instead of just saying they're desperate, so they're making wacky choices.
Yeah.
Which I guess the article, like if you read it from a knowing side, like we are, that's the glaringly obvious thing, is like all these people are so desperate. That seems odd, you know?
Right?
But yeah, like this article is basically like watching Fox News. It's like, sorry.
Okay, well, I think we have gone over our allotted 20-minute time. I don't know how long this is, but on that comment, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Brooke, do you have anything that you want to say before we finish this?
I do not. Great job hosting, Jesse.
Awesome. Well, on behalf of Brooke, Haley, and Jennifer, my name is Jesse. Thank you so much for watching this mild shit show of a first podcast. You guys are awesome, and thank you for being here. And man, I hope they publish a follow-up article that's better.
Yay, Generation Lyme.